Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Tie Up. I am your host, Chris Tighe, also known as TIE Fighter X1. Joining me today is Segway.
Shane Hudson, also known as Red Fox 15.
I mean, you've listened to how Aubrey Edwards does it, right? She literally cuts off Tony. Don't introduce me, Tony.
Well, she's also happy to take over the entire podcast. Tony has kind of got to put himself out there to control the flow.
We'll talk about more about. I was about to say something along those lines, but I guess we can wait until we get to that segment. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing well, having fun with all this quarantine. Plenty of people wanting to work from home, nobody wanting to let me.
I'm also still having to go into work. I worked from home today, but tomorrow they're like, "Hey, you need to come in." And I'm like, "I don't want to get sick." We'll see. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. So yeah, welcome to another edition of the Tie Up, your weekly AEW review, where we go over Dynamite, Dark when we watch it, the podcast, and some news and rumors ish. So yeah, let's get right into it. This week we had an excellent podcast, in my opinion. It was probably my favorite podcast that AEW has put out so far. What about you?
Oh, definitely.
So it was Tony Khan, and Tony Khan had a lot to say. Usually when you have podcasts, you usually have a host kind of leading it. And it seemed more like Tony Khan was leading this podcast. So why don't you catch everybody up with what they might have missed?
All right, so the podcast is AEW Unrestricted. AEW airs it on Thursdays. And this is also their third episode. So we're kind of keeping up with AEW. So this was a great one.
Yeah.
Tony Khan.
I wonder if we can get the contract, though, that they just got. Oh, we haven't covered that yet. Go ahead. Sorry.
So if you don't know, Tony Khan is the main person behind AEW Wrestling. All Elite Wrestling, the AEW. So he's the financial backer. He's the CEO. He's the guy. When it comes, he's the Vince McMahon of AEW.
Right.
And so they set him down to discuss, the going on, how we got here, what it's like being a person who runs All Elite Wrestling, who runs a European football club, and who helps in the office for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So is the football club his? Or is that also his dad's as well?
Yeah. AEW's his, and that's where the line is.
Okay.
He I'm not exactly sure what he does for the football club.
Well,
but
he does football club?
The European Football Club. Okay. I will call the Jaguars because I actually know who they are.
Yeah.
But with the Jaguars, he does data analytics for the Jaguars,
which is
interesting. When it comes to the office of a major NFL football team, data analytics is not something I expect to be in there, but it makes good sense.
That's funny that you don't think that. That's where I've always wanted my career to go. So full-time, I do work in data analytics, and I've secretly been trying to send my resume out to the Buccaneers organization to slide my way under that umbrella. It's not worked yet, but maybe one day. So I thought it was interesting that he was a huge wrestling fan and was also into data and analytics. I'm like, oh, I'm like Tony Khan Jr.
Yeah, except for Tony Khan has a Wikipedia of professional wrestling inside his head, and I don't think you're quite on his level there.
I think he's got a better memory of things.
Yes, I mean literal detailed facts.
Yeah.
Whereas you have a good understanding of what happened. He's like at minute 237.
Right. Yeah.
This happened.
And it's funny because he remembers stuff like that, and he was talking about why he remembers things like that, and it like just clicked when I was actually driving down the road when I was listening this week, and he said something about it, and I was like, oh wait, that's kind of like me, because I don't ever remember like dates. I don't remember anniversaries. I don't remember phone numbers. But for some reason, I can remember spots and matches, and I can remember jingles from commercials and movie quotes. And that's what my brain's filled with. And I thought it was interesting that Tony Khan's brain was also filled with wrestling spots. And he's like calling it to people later in life. Hey, you remember when you did this? No, I did that.
That was my move. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So at the time of recording this podcast, which the only thing that bothers me is they have like a bunch of episode canned already.
Yeah.
But they had just announced the 4-year contract extension with Warner Media, so that was a nice celebration of, hey, we actually have jobs for more than this 1 year.
Right. So very cool. Yeah, 4 years extended for AEW. They'll be married into that contract with TNT, and they're safe. We all know how contracts work, right? Contracts are always made out for the company writing the contract. They can get out, but the talent can't. So,
Wait, I would take exception to that. Turner has a history of writing contracts that they ended up paying well into the early 2000s.
That is true. They did. I mean, but Ted Turner's no longer really there, right? So, do you think we'd still see something like that today?
That was a Time Warner contract that those specific talents had.
And
so,
you're talking about like Sting, I believe, right? Like Sting had a contract that went well into after WCW was bought. Flair, I think, was another one. Is there?
Hogan had one. Hall and Nash both had one. They, I think they lasted like 1 or 2 years, like 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
And that's why the invasion angle was so bad. Was
right.
Everyone who had any value had a contract that just let them sit on their ass.
Yeah, the top talent was all locked up, and if they would have signed with WWE, they could have, but it would have voided the rest of their contract. So none of those guys wanted to void that contract. They'd much rather sit at the house and get paid than go help them get buried, because that's what WWF was going to do anyway with the WCW invasion gimmick. They weren't going to let them look better. It's said that they were supposed to actually branch off into 2 different companies, but Vince didn't like how it was turning out, so that's why you actually saw just the whole thing get buried with some top talent going over to WCW, like Steve Austin. Didn't make sense. I know that Steve Austin wrestled in WCW, but to put him as the leader of WCW when he was literally one of the main reasons WWF won that war was god awful, in my opinion.
The storyline made sense. He was the anti-authority. So if WWF's the authority.
Didn't you have The Rock join over there too, though?
I don't even remember. I think 2 weeks into it, I stopped watching.
I think The Rock joined the invasion. I'm like, he literally never seen the inside of a WCW ring. This is horrible. Anyway, back to the main story about Tony Khan.
So, we didn't get sidetracked there or anything.
No. That's why podcasts are fun, though, because you can just start discussing other stuff.
So, we got the contract extension. We got job security. Now it is not just Tony Khan throwing a bunch of money at something that he wanted to see happen.
So yeah, and then he went on to kind of talk about how AEW started, and that he first asked his dad about it, and his dad pretty much straight up said no. And he wrote up his business plan and presented it, and his dad's still like, no. And it took him 3 or 4 times before his dad, finally agreed. But I thought what was interesting was the original name that Tony Khan wanted to name this. World's Best Wrestling. Now, in theory, that is exactly what they are. That is what All Elite Wrestling is. It's the better wrestling product. And I like that, there is no entertainment in AEW. It's wrestling. Um, so, but World's Best Wrestling, what do you think of that name?
I mean, honestly, it sounded like Tony came it up when he was about 4 and just never let go of it.
And we kind of found that out because Tony Khan, for the last 26 years, I think he said, he's been writing matches and stuff in notebooks or on the computer. And his show was always called Dynamite, which was really cool that he brought it up. And like now that's what the name of the show is Dynamite. And that's kind of like World's Best Wrestling ended up. It's just Dynamite now. That's probably the
Right.
better name, right?
Yeah, I love it that everybody's going, well, it's Turner, they had Nitro, Nitro's an explosive dynamite. Yeah, that's how they came up with it. No, Tony Khan has just been using dynamite since he was a kid for his
Yeah.
promos.
I thought it was awesome though that he's been writing up matches and stuff. So you've been a longtime wrestling fan and you're pretty good with tech. Have you ever heard of a game called Extreme Warfare Revenge?
I have not.
All right, so it's a tech simulator, and which you are the booker of a wrestling promotion. After the show, we're gonna have to get you a copy and let you start playing around in there. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
So yeah.
Uh,
So how did he actually bring Dynamite to TNT?
all right, so Tony likes to do Halloween parties. So in 2016, he goes to a Halloween party with a friend at a mansion. There's a lot of high name people. He's dressed as the Macho Man,
Oh
focusing on the
yeah.
Slim Jim commercial. So he meets Kevin Riley, who's the head of Warner, and he just kind of has a conversation with him. And we get to next year because nobody meets people twice in 1 year. They just do it at Halloween parties. 2017, we have Kevin Riley coming to the Halloween party. He's dressed as a cheerleader, and then we have Tony Khan, who's still dressed as Randy Savage
you know
from the
what?
Slim Jim commercial.
You know what that reminds me of is How I Met Your Mother. Were you ever a fan of How I Met Your Mother?
Right up until like the last episode.
All right, so you knew Ted, and he went to every Halloween party as the oh, what was it? He was looking for the slutty pumpkin, but he always dressed
Right.
as I
The
can't-
the God, that card from
yeah,
Florida from
it's like a
2000.
ballot,
Yeah.
right? But I can't
Yeah.
think of the actual thing from it. But so he kept going to it every year, looking for the slutty pumpkin. He always wore that costume because he wanted her to see him. And that's what this story reminded me of. Like he's like, so the next year when it's Macho Man again, I'm like, oh my god, Kevin Riley is the slutty pumpkin.
Oh,
So yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So Tony Khan's thrifty with the Halloween costumes. That or he's just a really big fan of Macho Man. And um, just casually talking, reintroducing himself. Just keeping yourself in the memory of people you've met. Just kind of saying, "Hey, remember me?" So we get around to April of 2018. He's at another party. So apparently he does these party things a lot. Kind of a little envious. And he bumps into Kevin Riley again. Well, in 2018, the TV rights were up for Raw and SmackDown, and people were bidding on it. And Turner was thinking, yeah, I might want to get me some of that action. And Tony starts talking about, is that really worth it for what the Turner Network is? I mean, you guys had the top wrestling promotion 20 years ago. That's not really what this is. And the money they're asking for, maybe not what you want to spend.
Right.
So after discussing that and realizing that some top tier talent is their contracts are coming to an end here real soon in 2018, he kind of pitches the idea of I'll sell you a wrestling promotion to put on TV. So they being Turner, they talk about it. They bring Tony Khan's crew in at the base level, talking to lawyers and everybody, just working the way all the way back up to the CEOs to see if that's really what they want to do. And basically Tony commits to building an entire wrestling promotion just to say, "Here's how good we are. Let me demo this for you, so they can decide if they're going to put this on TV." And
And I
he's,
like.
he's got some.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I like how
Mhm.
we always hear about in business that everything has trends, right? Like Barbie was super popular, and then Barbie died out, and then guess what happened? Barbie was popular again. The Power Rangers were super popular when we were kids, and then they kind of phased out. But you just saw recently a movie was released, and I constantly see Jason David Frank advertising like new Power Ranger stuff all the time. So I think that's
Mhm.
about to make a big comeback again. Maybe not the way that they did it with the last movie, because the last movie wasn't very good. But like more of the original stuff. And the fact that he brought up like, hey, 20 years ago, you guys were number one in cable with the hottest wrestling promotion on TV. That trend thing, like that's just consumers. That baseball cards right now are
Yeah.
coming back. And to bring that up to these guys was really smart of Tony Khan. I thought that was a really interesting way for him to start that conversation with Kevin Riley.
Oh yeah, and just to add on to that, 20 years seems to be the magic number for everything.
Yes. But you got to think though, because now, uh, you know, 20 years ago for me was I was 15. Yeah, I was 15. Sorry, math.
That is not hard math. I'm very sad for you right now.
I was 15. I was thinking 5, but no, 15. I was a young adult, or starting to become a young adult, and I was really into the things I was really into, and so now I've got my own kids, and it's like, well, now I want to pass the things that I'm really into down to my kids, and so that's why I think that 20-year cycle is the magic number.
Mhm.
But go ahead. So he talked about that. What was some of the initial talent that Tony Khan was considering?
So this are some good names that are coming up. People who were available right there at the 2018 mark. He had, and you may be familiar with some of these names. They had Cody. I think you've seen him perform once or twice. Um,
Cody.
no, Runnels, because
Cody Runnels.
because a certain industry owns the names to that specific name, which is why you don't see it on any of the lower thirds.
Right.
So you got Cody, you got the Young Bucks, which no, no duh. But some of the other names that were coming out, talked about Jericho. Jericho had been kind of a free agent already, he'd been performing in Japan, but Jericho said, "Yeah, I'll do some of this Japan stuff, but I think I'm done wrestling in the States." And
Yeah.
I'm really happy that Tony Khan could convince him otherwise.
He actually said the only person I will wrestle for in the States is Vince McMahon. And
Hmm.
Jericho didn't want anything to do with AEW in the initial talks. And I'm not sure if you read any of Jericho's books, but he kind of talks about that. Like the main goal was always WWE. And
Hmm.
once he got there, he didn't really care about going back down. Like he already reached the
Right.
pinnacle, and there was nothing better than that. So to see him change his mind and go full in with AEW, or all in, uh, it really speaks volumes of Tony Khan and his vision of where he wants AEW to be, for Jericho to grab onto that and try and help him get there.
So, did you ever hear what convinced Jericho to sign his long-term contract?
I did not.
Tony Khan secured television rights with a company that Chris Jericho respected.
Oh, was it TNT?
It was TNT. The TNT deal with Warner Media is what got Chris Jericho to sign on for a long-term contract.
That's very awesome.
But so somebody else he managed to get in, Jim Ross. It was a high name in the announcing industry for wrestling that just brought a lot of people because they heard, hey, if Jim Ross is coming to AEW, they're doing something. And then somebody else they were going to try to get, not as successful. They were going to try to get CM Punk.
which is
Could you imagine
interesting.
AEW with CM Punk?
Which is interesting because I know that CM Punk is kind of locked into a contract right now, but his contract is not with the other company. So
No.
in theory, he could join the this company and not have an issue at all. No what am I competitive clause NDC.
Non-compete.
Yes, non-compete. I couldn't think of it. NCD, is it NCD? Yeah, non-compete disclosure. Um I thought that was interesting. He tried to get Punk. I kind of know that Punk was out of the question, but what was more interesting to me was the fact that he brought up JR and the fact that he was selling JR so much. And Tony Schiavone sitting in the room. And Tony's been pretty quiet for this whole podcast, and it's just like Tony Khan has said numerous times, like, "Oh, you guys are really good at what you guys do," talking to Aubrey Edwards and Tony Schiavone. But the fact that like he went after Jr. and not Tony, like I wonder how Tony felt in that situation. Like I'm sure that Tony Schiavone really respects Jim Ross, and he
Oh
learned
yeah.
a lot from Jim Ross. But at the same time, it's like you've got to take somewhat. We're men too, right? You take some kind of ego shot when you hear all of this praise for Jim Ross, and Tony's just got to sit here and kind of grin and bear it because his boss is talking about somebody else that's doing his job better than him for his whole life.
Yeah, it's funny actually talking about ego because watching the WCW Nitro days, I don't think there was anybody who sat in the booth that appeared to have more ego than Tony Schiavone.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm looking at this where Tony Schiavone wasn't even one of the first announcers they went after. I mean, he was kind of, we have our booth together. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt if we put Tony in there.
And
So,
I know we talked about this off screen a few times, but I think Tony does really good with the Mean Gene
mhm.
role that they've kind of given him a little bit lately, and he's in commentary, and I took note of it later, but when Dynamite started, Shivani was not in the booth at the start of Dynamite, and it was Taz, Excalibur, and Jim Ross, and just those three. It is 10 times better because you have Taz, who's very knowledgeable about the industry, and he knows how to talk. All right, he's like me. He just kind of takes over the screen, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But he fills up that gap of space with confidence. Where when you hear Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, and Excalibur, sometimes you get these awkward moments of them like not knowing when to step in over the other guys.
Right. Um, Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone basically for majority of their lives held the same position.
Right.
So it's kind of hard when you're used to doing that and sharing it. I mean, even when they were away from their respective fields, Tony was doing baseball, uh, Jim was doing football. I mean, they were still announcing, and they were lead announcers.
So why do you
It's what
think
they're
that
used to doing.
Taz doesn't have an issue with like stepping over those guys and uh like because I don't think he does it disrespectfully. He doesn't come off of that
No,
at all, right? But I think Excalibur's a little like starstruck when he's next to them, and Taz
mm,
doesn't feel that as much because I guess he was a main player in the wrestling game with ECW, and then he went over to WWE till he got injured. Then he joined the announce booth over there, and he excelled in announcing over there. So what do you think is different for Taz than maybe Excalibur and not wanting to step over those guys?
I think Taz has the mindset of he's in a two-man booth, regardless of how many people are in there. And I think Excalibur is nervous with a three-man booth. I mean, nervous is probably the wrong word. He's I'd say reluctant to push himself in, even though he has some of the better words. Better words. I do not have the better words.
Yeah, he's not calling five arms out there, right?
Yeah, well, that was a joke. Calm down.
Was it? I thought jokes were supposed to be funny. Anyway, moving on. We will take over this show of me bashing the commentary team and Fox defending them until we die. So
until they die.
One of the two.
And I have nothing left.
Anything else from the podcast you wanted to go over?
I mean, the discussions went a long time on getting that TV deal. They nearly worked their way into 2019 trying to get that taken care of. I mean, just think about that. Your first serious conversation starts in April, and towards December, you're still having this same negotiation.
Right.
It's that intense.
And they talked about a specific Dynamite. I don't remember the date. Do you remember the date?
I don't remember the date, but they were in Jacksonville.
And so it was probably just a couple of months ago then, right? When they did the homecoming back to Jacksonville, and
right.
They had that spectacular show, and that's when they're like, all right, look, you guys just came off a really good show. You guys have been putting on solid shows before then, but last night's show, and Tony Khan talked about like that just being the kind of the nail in the coffin. That got the contract renewed for 4 years, and so kudos to AEW. I'm super proud of them. It was a super good interview with Tony Khan. If you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend it from a both from a fan standpoint, from a business standpoint, and from a wrestling standpoint, to go in and listen to everything he had to say about the growth of AEW, because I think you could learn a lot about all three of those things.
So something else, Tony sits in what's called the gorilla position at some words. Why are words so hard?
At most shows,
most promotions call it a gorilla position.
And why is that? Do you know?
Named after Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah. So the legendary Gorilla Monsoon used to sit in this spot right behind the curtain, in case we have any like brand new wrestling fans or people that don't know. Right behind the curtain when you first walk into the locker room. So you have the entranceway. Right past the entranceway, you have the gorilla position where there's monitors and people are watching the show there. And it's usually, it was usually Gorilla Monsoon. And then whoever was booking the show as well would watch it there as well. So even through independent wrestling, who a lot of people have never even met Gorilla Monsoon, you would have an area behind the entrance that was called the Monsoon position. And they had a couple of monitors, and you would watch the matches. You'd watch for your cues. And so Tony Khan sits there. I also thought it was interesting that Tony Khan is the person that is putting together these shows for the most part, in production.
He's the head booker.
Yeah. Not saying that he shouldn't be able to do it, but for somebody that has no wrestling background, he was just a fan. That's really freaking impressive. I'm not going to lie. To have the mindset that Tony does, like Tony belonged in the business. Like that's what people in the business say. He has that mindset, and you either have it or you don't, which is okay. Like there's nothing wrong with casual fans, but you either think like a wrestler or you don't think like a wrestler. And I thought it was very interesting that Tony Khan's been putting together shows for years, and then watching Dynamite and seeing everything come out, and he's the main booker. It's just like, wow, this is somebody that had no training whatsoever. He's just kind of going based off of what he thinks he would like as a wrestling fan, with a clear understanding of how wrestling works. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, he mentioned, sitting in the hotel room trying to book All In, that he would sit there and he's thinking about things, but he gets sidetracked because he's thinking about so many things. Like he was thinking about, we need to put um, Jungle Boy against Chris Jericho, and build around that, and just things that we saw happen, months after All In.
Right.
But
And I've heard rumors that they're booking way far in advance, which is smart when you're in the wrestling business. You can't help injuries, but you still want to know where you're going and kind of
right,
reverse engineer. It's just like any other business. You always want to, like, what is the problem that you have, and then reverse engineer that into what the solution is going to be. Wrestling is the same way. You kind of know where you want to be and how are you going to get there. And the fact that we saw Jungle Boy versus Chris Jericho, we saw the making of Darby Allin. We've seen multiple times just like them making their own stars, whereas somewhere else you only have the people that are already stars and they're not grooming these new characters. And it's amazing that Tony Khan has been thinking about this, and he's the one bringing it up to the other people in the room, because he talked about like Dustin Rhodes was in there, Cody was in, or Dustin Runnels, Cody Runnels, the Elite, the Young Bucks, Kenny, and numerous other people, and he's just like, yeah, look, I had this idea for this. This is way down the line. I know we're supposed to be talking about this, but while I'm thinking about this, let's go ahead and talk about it. I thought it was really cool and really interesting that it's coming from his head. That he's wanting to groom these local grown home talents. I look at Adam Page. Adam Page
oh
is
man,
super over right now, and I didn't know a lot about Adam Page before AEW, but the way that they booked him has been incredible. Um, as opposed to like what's his name? Orange Cassidy. Sorry. Orange Cassidy is super over because the fans are just smart, right? Like, and the fans have seen him elsewhere. It's not because of what AEW's done. It's just because of who Orange Cassidy is. Whereas Adam Page, I think, is more of a, and Darby Allin is more of a how we've booked him instead of the fans knowing who they are, if that makes sense.
oh yeah. Like I knew Hangman Page from the Elite, mostly from being the Elite, but I did catch some of his work in Ring of Honor. But AEW just showcased that, and that's what some of these young talent needed. Going to talk later on in some matches. We get into the 6-man tag team match, and half of that performance is guys under the age of 24.
Right.
It's just amazing what they're doing with the youth.
So I think that's a good segue. Let's go ahead and jump into Dynamite from last week and talk about Dynamite. I think we both missed Dark this week. So I don't think, unfortunately, there's anything to talk about there. But let's talk about Dynamite. So we opened the show with Hangman being interviewed by Tony about his mystery partner.
New favorite position for Tony.
Yeah, and his Mean Gene Okerlund position. And it was decided by Hangman that it was definitely not going to be one of the Young Bucks.
And I love that he wanted them there to know, hey, it's not you, Matt. It's did you bring your gear, Nick? Oh, it's not you either.
Yeah. He's, that's a really cool situation. Where do you think that's leading? Because you can't turn Paige heel. Paige is literally the I hate calling him Paige because I think of Diamond Dallas Page. So we'll call him Hangman. He's literally like the Stone Cold of 2020.
Right.
And so you can't turn him heel because it's not going to work. The fans are still going to cheer him.
Right.
So where do you go with this storyline, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think they may try it anyways with a DTA. I mean, it worked 20 years ago.
Okay. So after that, we went into our first match with Ortiz, with Santana versus Cody with Arn. I'll let you take over this part.
So we have this match, and this is kind of a stupid match to me. This match came about because Ortiz hit Cody with a chair.
Right.
I mean, that was their whole build up. I need a little more on build up. I realize you got to put something in the card, but
Well, so I'm going to stop you because the buildup is not this. The buildup is blood and guts. And him hitting him with a chair was really just build up for blood and guts, not necessarily this match.
I think you could replace hit with chair and say poked me in the shoulder, and it's just the same.
Hey, that worked for
Um,
Kevin Nash, all right?
yeah,
He won a world championship with just poking somebody in the shoulder. So,
but you got that backwards. He lost a world championship
oh, right,
by
right.
getting
Sorry.
poked in the shoulder. Yeah, and with all the story they've been doing, it felt like we gotta have an excuse to get Cody in on this, and I didn't care for that too much. So he comes out, he being Ortiz, and the sunglasses come off, and this man magically has two eyes, a la Moxley. But no one wants to talk about
Santana,
that.
right? Not Ortiz, but
Oh, sorry.
Santana. Yeah, yeah.
No, no, I think it was Ortiz.
Was it Ortiz?
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. Go ahead.
They really shouldn't separate tag teams. It makes things hard on us.
I know, right?
So, anyway, so it was a big thing that Moxley got his revenge, stabbed him in the eye in my hometown. It was awesome. And now it's just not a big deal after we made this huge thing about it. I was a little disappointed in that.
Yeah. And can we just agree that Cody Rhodes' tights are the worst in professional wrestling? Like, I don't know who decided that he should wear these wrestling tights, but they are literally the worst in professional wrestling. I don't know if he just thinks it's funny to make it look like he's wearing a thong and to accent literally just the crotch. Not just the crotch area. The crotch area is always been a popular place to accent, but he is literally just accenting the crotch, and it looks like he's got a garner on his leg. Like, they are literally the worst tights in professional wrestling. I don't know why it took me so long to notice this, but I noticed it on this last week's Dynamite, and then I went back a few Dynamites and pay-per-views, and I'm like, oh my God, he's wearing them here. He's wearing them here. These are literally the worst tights in professional wrestling. Please, Cody, if you ever see this, stop. All right? Just stop.
All right. Now that we've secured Cody from taking part of our podcast anymore, I have never noticed. I've always really enjoyed his boots, so I guess I just never really saw the pants.
Cody has always had really good wrestling boots, like always. These tights are, I just ruined pro wrestling for you. Well, I'm gonna ruin pro wrestling some more later, but that's another way that I'm ruining pro wrestling for you.
I'll probably see his tights from now on, and I don't blame you.
So we had Jake the Snake come back down. What do you think of the person that was going to be his surprise for Cody?
Being honest, I was a little embarrassed because in all my speculation of who this could possibly be, the guy I knew had signed a contract with AEW never crossed my mind.
Yeah, Lance
So
Archer is that guy. But I'm not impressed. I don't think it's a good fit for Jake the Snake. Like?
I think it's kind of he's rebuilding himself, and just enough of the psychologist that is Jake the Snake mixed in with this new persona he's working on. I can get behind it.
I'm not gonna say I can't get behind it, but I don't know if he can pull it off. That's my problem.
That's to be seen.
Yeah, I don't know if he mindset wise is strong enough to play the mind games that Jake the Snake played. Um, and ring wise, he's super talented. Lance Archer is super talented. He's super good. But to be paired with Jake the Snake, you've got to be of a certain mindset. And I don't know if Lance Archer is that person, but I am willing to find out.
I mean, that's the type of person who needs a coach. Someone who typically isn't like what their coach is trying to coach them in. That fits good for me.
So in the notes, you also placed something about the ringside spot that they always sit in. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
God, that gate right there in the corner where the steps are, like they don't put seats there, and they have it set up to move in and out, and that's just the go-to spot anytime there's action that involves past the barrier. That's where they go through. I mean, the exception being Moxley coming in, he doesn't go there.
Right.
But everyone else, if they're leaving through the crowd, that's where they're going. If they're going to sit somebody in who's planted, they're not pulling someone out of their seats for a segment. They're pulling up 2 chairs right there, and just it's getting a little predictable, and
that's frustrating because you would see with the big time matches, they would place certain people in the crowd, certain people being like other tag teams. Like when they had the tag team tournament going on, you saw tag teams spread throughout the crowd, watching the match, which was really cool to me. I was like, that's something that's unique, and you want your talent watching and scouting other talent. And the fact that, like, hey, I'm not wrestling tonight, I'm just here because I know I'm going to be wrestling him in the future. I'm going to sit in this seat and make sure that I watch this match because this is a big match. That meant something to me. You watch UFC and you see big time UFC fighters sitting in the crowd watching. You see big time actors watching. I thought that they were going a really cool way with that. But now it's like they've slowed down on that, and you're right. They've only placed people in that same area. We just saw at Revolution, we had Hager's wife sitting in that exact same spot. And with the exception of Moxley, like you just said, where they literally sat 3 random people there with jackets and masks on for the whole show. And then the next week, they're going to turn around and go to the same spot in the crowd that they've been going. It's kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of the finish of that match? We saw Cody Rhodes finish in a way that we haven't seen before.
Cody used an old wrestling move from what someone might consider a competitive family. Cody lashed on the figure 4 and took that for a submission somehow.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that he finished the match with the figure 4. Do you think wrestling me, right, thinks there's something long term there? As a casual fan, did you think of anything like, where is this going to go? Did you overthink this like I did? Because I totally overthought it.
No, I didn't overthink it. I see things as just, this is a way to entertain me, where you're constantly going, where are we going from here? And to me, it was just, way too many people are using the figure 4 these days.
So after the match, Cody got attacked from behind. Arn came in the ring, and we had the numbers game. So there was a lot going on. You wanna discuss any of that?
It's just a lot of back and forth. So Cody took a shot from behind, and Arn gets in the ring to separate. I thought it was really cool that Proud and Powerful is sitting there. They have a weapon in their hands, and all Arn has is the spine buster, and they're still afraid to get close enough to take one of those.
Right. I mean, it is the best spine buster in the business. So.
Oh yes. I'm actually disappointed I haven't seen more than I have.
It's been very disappointing that I haven't seen at least one. Like, I've been waiting, or did I miss it? Like, your face says I might have missed it.
Cody Rhodes, Cody and Sean Spears. Arn did a run-in, spine buster on Spears.
Okay, so
Perplexed Tully Blanchard.
I did
Cody,
I did miss it then. Okay.
yeah, I think it was on a pay-per-view. But it was great because he literally just comes in, spine buster, leaves. No hanging around, and he just walks in the back. And Tully Blanchard just has this amazingly confused look on his face and follows Arn to the back. It was great. I recommend going back to watch it.
I'll have to check that out. So yeah, we had post match. Cody got attacked. Arn came in, and then Kenny and Matt came in for the save. But then we get cut to the back where Chris Jericho and the rest of Inner Circle is. And what do we see?
We see them having a conversation about how they're going to run over all the roster. And in particular, they tell him that, Nick might have a little bit of a headache. And the camera pans back, and a roll-up door is literally sitting on Nick Jackson's face. Not the best of looks for Nick.
No, not at all. So it looks like Nick may be out of action for a while. Blood coming out of his mouth. He seemed pretty beat up. Anything else about that segment you want to talk about?
I was a little disappointed with the showmanship from the medical response team. I mean, doing their best to stick with the fact that we're in Salt Lake City, except for we're going to pull out a bodyboard that says New York City on it.
Right.
Really dragged me out of the moment.
Yeah. So pro wrestling's so important because you're trying to suspend belief, right? We all know for the most part that this is a show, but you're still trying to suspend belief, and when you completely ruin that by bringing in a bodyboard that's from a completely different state, you're not doing a good job. All right.
It's little details that always mess things up.
It's the little things. We talked about that last week. So after that, we did have a match with the women's. It was Chris Statlander and Hikaru Shida. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Hikaru Shida.
And they faced Bea Presley and Nyla Rose, AEW Women's Champion Nyla Rose. What did you think about that match?
I think this match was much better than the presentation that was put on with just Nyla Rose and Chris Statlander.
Yeah, this was a much better match between the four of them than it was at Revolution in the singles match. I really loved the Holy Sheeta chants. I thought that
the chant was amazing.
Really clever, and by the fans. I was like, oh, that's cool. Is that the first time they've done that? I don't remember hearing that.
I don't think I've heard that in AEW. I'll admit I have not been following Sheeta, so
right. So the wrestler in me did notice some communication issues. It was more of a mess up more on Presley's part. She tried to get on the ropes. She slipped trying to get up, and then once she got up, she slipped again, and it looked like excuse me, looked like Statlander had to just kind of take over from there and just kind of like, all right, look, you messed up twice. We can't. We're just gonna move on, right? Like,
right.
Forget your spot. Let's move on. And that's the golden rule. Is stuff happens, and sometimes the things don't work out sometimes, and it's up to the experienced person in the ring to say, all right, that didn't work, let's move on. Don't ever try to do it again. And they did not do it this time, but in the past I've seen a few AEW talents try to go back to the same thing they messed up. So it was nice to see people learn from their mistakes here and just kind of continue through the match. Statlander took over, and then we just kind of kept going throughout the match. So what happened through the rest of the match?
I just some back and forth. Nothing really stood out to me except for Nyla Rose went in and did a spear, and a little different for her, a little different for the women. Period.
Right.
But one of the things that really just caught me about it was how she hit this and so perfectly rolled through with it. and she was just immediately back on her feet. It
And
was really impressive to me to see that
she's a
move.
big person.
Yes.
So for her something to do like something like that is really impressive, and it shows her agility. And
Hmm.
I love seeing like things like that as well. So good call
Yeah,
out on that.
it I've watched Nyla Rose wrestle, and I haven't felt like there was a lot of potential there. Like, she may be at the top of her game, and that's not the best thing for her.
Right.
But seeing that move just went, yes, there is more in this bottle, and I'm ready to see it.
Nice. And so after the match, or who won the match?
So, God, who won the match? I got so caught up in the fact that it was actually a better performance that I forgot who won.
I'm pretty sure B Priestley got the victory, and Nyla
Yeah.
Rose was still down after the match. And B Priestley grabbed the championship title from the apron and kind of held it up, saying like she was going to be the next challenger.
Oh, she actually attacked Nyla Rose
Did she?
after the match.
I must have
Yeah,
missed that.
it was just a brief attack. I mean, nothing huge. Just to let me remind you that we may have tagged tonight, but I'm here for that, not to be your friend.
How do you feel about B Presley being maybe the next competitor for Nyla Rose to face?
I'm not sure she's there yet. I mean, you
I
saw some of the missteps in the match.
Right.
That one corner spot wasn't the only one.
Right. And not only that, but they're both kind of bad guys. They're both kind of heels. Um,
Hmm.
and you got Big Swole, and we'll talk about Big Swole here in a second. But she seems like more of the person next in line to get a title shot
Yeah.
than B Presley, and you kind of interject that with just some personal beef. I hit you, and then I posed with your title, and now I get a title shot, um, which is very unfortunate because AEW is all about the ranking system.
Yeah.
And Tony Khan in his podcast, we kind of glanced over that, but he talked about being different and having the rankings and that meaning something. But then when you do something like this, where, okay, well, now it looks like you're setting up for a title match between these two, and Presley didn't do anything to deserve that, uh, you kind of
I
make
mean,
those rankings out the
h-
window.
how you score in your rankings? I mean, you get a victory. Your victories and your tags also count kind of towards your singles competitor. It's all formulated in. So this did count a little towards her ability,
But does it put
but
her
there's
above Big Swole?
no, it doesn't put her above. But to say that it was nothing and to give her an option is a little
Okay,
false.
that's fair. And where do you know personally? We should probably start covering this on the show. Do you know where Britt Baker sits on the rankings?
At the announce table.
That's what I thought as well. She hasn't been in the ring competing. So I'm kind
Right.
of curious where she is in the 1 through 5 spot. That'd be very interesting to me. So after that, we had a doc. I can't speak. We had a Dark Order video. Um, or did we?
So our fan favorite right now of Christopher Daniels decided that he needed his own Dark Order video, and I gotta say they did a great job of taking the Dark Order video and just superimposing Christopher Daniels on top of it. He
Right.
fell right into place. He could be the leader of the Dark Order.
I feel like we've discussed this before.
The video I felt like was a great clarification of where he stood with the Dark Order and what he thought about them. It was a great promo, really entertaining.
Very well done from AEW production. So kudos to you guys for that. I thought it was very well done. And Christopher Daniels, as usual, was spot on. I'm a huge Christopher Daniels fan. Have been since early Ring of Honor days back in the early 2000s when he was having three-way matches with AJ Styles and Low-Key, who now wrestles mostly for MLW. I've always been a huge Christopher Daniels fan, and it's nice when I get to see him. Like he tried out for WCW back in the day, and
He did more than try out.
yeah, he was signed, but I remember he tried the same move we saw in Dynamite not too long ago, where he went for the moonsault off the ropes and almost broke his neck. He
It was
did
all
that.
that hair.
Yeah, he did that in WCW years ago, and that actually kind of cost him his spot. So it's always good to see him like reinventing himself and continuing to be as relevant as possible for him, because he's always been the underdog, and I really appreciate him. After that, we had MJF, the Butcher, and the Blade versus Jurassic Express. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on my notes. Oh, I did.
So-
Before we jump in there, I do want to say that Christopher Daniel challenged both Uno and Grayson in a one-on-one match. He didn't say he was going to do a handicap match, but he did challenge both of those guys to separate matches. So maybe that's what we're going to be seeing here soon. But yeah, then we went to MJF, and I want to say I just love this guy. MJF is my spirit animal. Like he's so good. All right.
So MJF's birthday was this past Sunday. And he's gotten really old now. He's the age of 24. Probably close to retirement in professional wrestling.
Nah, he's got another 15 years.
So you gotta love this kid, because his birthday, he tweets out, "Isn't it amazing? Everyone's shutting down in celebration of my birthday." Hashtag coronavirus, hashtag better than you.
Yes.
So you got this 6-man tag team match. You got MJF, you got Butcher, and you have Blade. And I want to state that Butcher and Blade are probably one of the most underrated tag teams they have going right now.
Yeah,
versus Jurassic Express.
They looked really good. I was really impressed. Their work on Dynamite has been very limited. Even when they've had matches, they've kind of limited them. And this is the first time that I feel like we've really seen who Butcher and the Blade is inside of the ring. Yeah. And I thought, man, they stood out, man. They were really good.
Yeah, since they came out, I've thought this is an intriguing tag team. They have more than just a ring entrance. They can do stuff inside the ring, and every week they come out, they get in the ring, and they do more.
Right.
I'm really loving that, and I feel like they're kind of underappreciated. And I don't think they're getting the recognition they deserve in the tag team world.
And Bunny is showing more too.
Yes, I gotta say, aside from that, just what she does in general, one of the problems I have with Bunny right now is she stays to the right side of the hard camera.
Yes.
And that changed some this episode, but when they were in town, my seat was to the right side of the hard camera. Allie puts on a show. She puts on a great show, and I really wish they got more of it on camera.
So, and we keep bouncing back to the podcast. Let's bounce back one more time. They talked though about how most of the people on the AEW roster has no experience working with live television.
Right.
And that just brings up another valid point of Bunny. I haven't seen her a lot. But I'm because I haven't seen her, I know that she hasn't been on live television. So the more that she gets familiar with where these cameras are supposed to be and where she's supposed to look, that's going to get better. And it's exciting to watch them grow in that aspect as well, because you see week in and week out, they're like doing more things towards certain cameras. And as a wrestler, I notice it because like that's what you're supposed to do. And I don't think a fan usually picks up on those kind of things. So,
Right.
but they appreciate it because they get to see more of the action. Um, and we have a great segue to the main event during that. But let's continue on this match first and
Well,
talk about that.
to still a little bit about your point about knowing the camera and everything, it's one of the things I like about AEW is they have a nice mixture of true veterans with their new talent.
Right.
One of the things that was brought up in my listening of podcasts the other day was talking about Gene Okerlund. He was talking about how David Flair had a spot for a segment in the ring, and David went from I'm just somebody's kid to I'm on WCW television, so he really didn't know what he was doing.
Not at
And
all.
he's out there with Stacy. He's out there with Stacy Keebler, and he's about to do this interview thing, and he's literally standing behind Stacy at the hard camera,
Right.
and Gene just kind of casually pulls him out from behind her, not enough to actually be noticed what he's doing, but she knew that he wasn't where he needed to be and got him there. He didn't need somebody in his ear to tell him to move.
Right.
He just naturally knew how to do it, and I think that's one of the things that some of these veteran players bring to the table.
Yeah, it's been really nice the mixture of experience and youth that AEW has been bringing to the table, to kind of teach these younger guys about how to perform at a higher level than they're used to. Because you can say what you want, but all of these guys are super talented. That's on the roster. They all know how to wrestle.
Mhm.
But it's still a performance. It's still entertainment in a way. They have to now learn how to perfect that craft for everybody watching. So when I was wrestling, it was always to do things for the back person of the crowd, like the last row of the crowd, whatever building you were working in. If it held 100 people, if it held a million people, like you would do everything for that last person in the crowd, and if they could see it, then you knew for sure everybody else closer could see it.
Yeah. So now that we've been thoroughly segued from our match, uh, the other half of this tag team match, the six-man tag team match, was Jurassic Express, Luchasaurus, Marco Stunt, and Jungle Boy. So you get in there, you have MJF, who hadn't had his birthday yet, so he's 23 years old. You mix that with Jungle Boy and Marco, all three of those guys are under the age of 24. That's 3 out of 6. 50% of the people in this ring have not hit a 25th birthday yet,
Right.
and they are performing at this level.
That's
It was
impressive.
thoroughly impressive to me.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Because I don't think I hit my prime until just before I hit 30, and it also depends on who you're in the ring with. And what you can learn from other people, and these guys are, every week they're in the ring with somebody that's excellent, but
Mm.
they got here for a reason, right? Like it wasn't like this a year ago, when AEW was first getting started. They were in the ring with people that weren't as good. So to see these guys performing like at the level they are has been very fun. And I want to say that like this match was very surprising because you're used to the old tag team format. Like you've got the baby faces that look really good in the beginning, and then you've got the bad guys that kind of take over in the middle of the match, and then we know that the baby face is going to get the hot tag at the end, and then whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But usually the guy taking all of the heat in the middle of the match is the smallest guy in the ring, and you save the big guy to coming in for a house of fire and looking all tough and stuff. That's not what we got. We got Luchasaurus being attacked tremendously in the knees and completely taken out of this match. What did you think of the psychology of that?
I thought the psychology is great because, like you said, it's not what everybody expects. And then on top of that, you're taking an individual of MJF who doesn't do a lot of tag team work, and you're putting him with an already established tag team. You really just hit or miss there with whether the chemistry is there or not. But the chemistry was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, In storyline, this is just the tag team that MJF hired to take care of some business, but they work really well
They
together. They
worked
were very fluid in
really,
everything
really
they
well.
did. They had one purpose, was to stop Luchasaurus from being able to do anything, and they did their job.
One of the false tags that I really enjoyed, it was nothing, but we talk about little things a lot during this podcast. We've only had 3 episodes, but we've talked about little things a lot. And you saw MJF and I want to say it was the Blade. I could be wrong. Both of them were holding onto Luchasaurus's legs, and Luchasaurus was slowly making his way across the ring, dragging those guys until he got too close, and then they were like, oh crap, like let's get up, let's knock him back down. But just that simple maneuver of him walking slowly while dragging them across the ring meant so much to the match that, like, it was nothing, but it was a big part of that match. And I think that's a lot of what younger guys miss. And you talked about these guys, half of these guys are underneath the age of what, 25, 24.
Yeah.
But they knew to incorporate, the showmanship of that moment in that match. I thought it was really interesting.
I have no clue how old Butcher is. He may be like Arn Anderson. He was just born 40 years old. But he looks like he brings a lot of veteran experience to
He
it.
does.
And that tag team, I just really enjoyed their work. And Luchasaurus, his ability to move is just impressive. How high he can kick, his ability to turn so quickly. He does not look like a big guy.
Yeah, he's very agile, but it scared me so much. He did a front flip plancha where he jumped off the middle rope and then jumped to the outside. The thing about those ropes is they do spring you back. And when he tried to get the momentum to get over the top rope after jumping off the middle rope, the rope stopped him, and it was almost really bad. He almost caught his neck on the apron, and that would have been really bad for him. He did clear it though, and it's super agile of him to do that. But I pray, please, Luchasaurus, I am a big fan of your work. I love how agile you are. Just don't do that one anymore. It reminds me of like the old story. Big Show, the Giant, used to climb to the top rope and do a moonsault, and it's like when you have a guy that size, it's super impressive. Okay. But there's no business to do it, and when you're that talented, don't do it. Okay, it's like when you hear about NFL players going out and they're playing basketball during the off season and they get injured, and now they miss the whole NFL season because they got injured playing basketball. Like, there's no place for that, guys.
Yeah, I love that about the Big Show or the Giant. I think it was God, what is his name? I just talking about him earlier from WCW. The president.
Oh, no, I'm gone.
Yeah, okay. He's got a podcast. 83 weeks. God, why am I blanking
Bischoff?
like this? Yes, Bischoff. I want to say it was Bischoff who was at ringside when the Giant Paul White was showing off that he could do a moonsault.
Right.
And he said, that was amazing, dude. That's just incredibly impressive. A guy your size, never fucking do that again.
Yeah. It's just you don't want to see those bigger guys like that get hurt. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Like, I can go rob a bank tonight. I'm not going to, and I shouldn't.
Not tonight.
But I could. Excellent match though. Who won that match? Do you remember?
MJF actually won the match by pinning the tiniest person in the ring taking down the tiniest person in the ring with his finishing move, Salt of the Earth.
So it was interesting that you saw him using Salt of the Earth again. To me, when he's been using the double cross for so long. So I guess he's over the Cody Rhodes and the fact that he beat him, and but he's still wearing the shirt. Oh, God bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
He's still wearing the shirt, so I thought it was a little weird that he's still going to wear the shirt, but he's going back to his old finishing move.
He's over the fact that he's in a feud with Cody. He's not over the fact that he beat Cody.
So you think he'll hold on to that for how long?
I think we're going to see that shirt easily for another 6 weeks.
6 weeks. All right. We're gonna mark that, and we're gonna see where we are at in 6 weeks. So then we went into a Darby Allin video. I don't remember what the video was about.
The video was about. It was Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara.
Yeah, he was wearing a Chris Jericho mask.
Specifically the cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
You have the best friends pose that became very popular of Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho. He had their faces from that pose,
right, with
the eyes cut out so you could see, and it was really disturbing but very entertaining at the same time.
And then Sammy got put into a body bag and dragged behind the truck, and then we faded to black. It was very odd. Especially with the Elite going up, we got Blood and Guts coming up, and that's where their focus is right now. I almost feel like AEW is trying to do too much with their storylines, because there's a lot to remember, and the casual wrestling fan can't remember it all, and they kind of forget about some of these small things. But they're also doing a good thing with continuously injecting that back into the show each week with these promos. Like, all right, yes, the Elite's about to go up against Inner Circle, but Darby Allin still has an issue with Sammy because of the skateboarding incident where they did his throat the way they did. So it's been interesting to see them doing so much, but at the same time continuing to try and keep everything together. What are your thoughts on that?
I would argue something completely different. I would say AEW is doing a poor job by only having one real storyline.
Okay.
You have the Inner Circle, and then you have the rest of AEW that has problems with the Inner Circle. The problems may be different from each other, but it's still AEW talent versus Inner Circle talent.
So do you think this is more of a WCW versus NWO type deal with what's going on?
Kinda, but very much turned down. I mean, the WCW NWO was turned all the way up to 11, to the point that they were saying the NWO was paying for their own time on Turner to run commercials.
Right.
Where it's still Inner Circle is inside of AEW, but they're separating themselves from the rest of the talent.
Yeah. So then we had Dr. Baker and Tony come out. Go ahead.
Real quick to interject with your your question earlier about Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker is currently in the 5th slot for the women's title.
Very nice. Okay, well that seems fair though. If she was at 3, I would have a major issue with it because she hasn't been in the ring in what seems like an eternity.
Her 2020 record is 1-2.
What? Okay, so she's been in the ring. We're in month 3, and she's been in the ring 3 times, which I'm not complaining about because her best work lately has been coming outside of the ring. So I'm definitely not complaining. But she came out with Tony. She brought Tony some coffee, and then she had an interview with Tony. What did she have to say?
She didn't really have a lot to say other than, Utah sucks.
Yeah. Very easy, cheap, your typical heel heat. A lot of you guys look alike.
That was my favorite. This looks more like a family reunion.
Yeah. You guys look like you've been eating a lot of sugar because you're overweight. Oh, and because I'm a dentist, I'm going to say that's also bad for your teeth.
Plenty of cavities.
Right. So Big Swole came out And what did Big Swole have to say?
She had a conversation about how Britt really wasn't doing the wrestling thing anymore. She was just running her mouth, and the only people who really were interested in her family was her boyfriend.
Well, Baker said something about her boyfriend,
Right.
about Swole's
Right.
boyfriend, and Swole took offense to that because she's married, baby, which was a clear reference to the other platform. What is it? Cedric Alexander
Yes.
and Adam Cole, correct? Is their
Yes.
significant others? Adam Cole being with Britt Baker, which they've made numerous references to, and even
Yeah.
on television, you saw on the other platform you saw a picture of Britt Baker on a major pay per view.
More
But
than once.
yeah, more than once. And then Cedric Alexander, that hasn't been really talked about too much, right? As far as AEW goes and that relationship.
They haven't brought it up on the AEW side. I'm not sure about the other side because I really do not care about their cruiserweight division.
Yeah. So just to get to the end of this, Baker then took the coffee that she gave Tony Schiavone, and Utah doesn't have Starbucks, so it was just some basic coffee, and she threw it in the face of Swole, and then she got out of there, and Swole was just kind of left by herself. So we see where that's going, right? But
Right.
what is your take on the constant like smart mark comments that AEW the little jabs that they make towards towards the other platform and like the casual comments to the relationships, like what is your take on all of that?
I have been in a world where this particular promotion lives in a silo and there's no other promotion. So I've enjoyed the change of pace for a promotion to acknowledge there's other companies out there and sometimes they do silly things. And
Right.
you could really feel at the end of that conversation an influence from the Young Bucks.
But at the same time, you also got to remember back to the day where WCW was beating WWF in the ratings every single night, and WCW was doing the same thing. They were poking jabs, they were giving out results until the
Yeah,
one night where a major face won the heavyweight championship in this other promotion, and it was
that'll
all
put butts in seats.
right. It was all downhill for them after that, and it was years before they even won another hour or weeks at least. Um, so it's like, how much attention do you want to give your competition?
I think lessons were learned that night. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but people aren't giving away the ends of matches anymore.
Right.
They've kind of backed off of that. Yeah, there's room for just light prodding, and I wouldn't even think that's a prod really. It was just a fun little thing that they did to just acknowledge that hey, there's something that exists there, and we're
Right.
not ignoring it. I really like that they're not ignoring things. The entirety of that 83 weeks, the other promotion pretended like WCW still didn't exist, and even when they're taking their talent, they're just, oh, he's dead.
Right.
He didn't swap teams. He died.
Right. Yeah. So it's been interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in towards the end of this podcast. But then we had a 6-man tag with Bad Boy uh, Joey Janela. I couldn't remember his name. Teaming up with Private Party versus Death Triangle. The first thing I want to say about this is so AEW for their entrances, they've been putting together very short clips of like movies, right? To announce their people. It's maybe 15 to 30 seconds long, and then it loops, and that's
Mhm.
continuously what you see. It's not like the full entrance theme that you would see at the other other platform, which is fine. Like I'm not mad at that at all. The reason I brought that up was because Death Triangles looks awesome. They have a 3 skulls with a triangle going through the skulls, like through the eye holes and then out through the mouth. And then at each side of the triangle, you had a skull. I thought it was phenomenal. And all of their videos they've been putting out is phenomenal. But I really like the Death Triangle one. But yeah, go ahead and talk about it.
The Death Triangle stood out on the image. Now, the music is what really got to me, because they literally took the Lucha Brothers music and just played it slightly differently. I mean, same lyrics and everything for Death Triangle.
It's just a
now,
remix.
this works fine when 2/3 of your guys have Hispanic descent, but then you have Pac in there, who really doesn't even remotely resemble Lucha.
And Pac, to me, is more the leader of this team too, right? So you would think that that if anything,
Right.
they would use more Pac's music than Lucha Brothers' music. So yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, but it came out good. I was surprised with Joey Janela. This guy went out there, he wrestled a match. He managed not to bleed. He managed not to break any of his bones. It felt very different for Joey Janela, and I was happy to see that he has more than one way to go in wrestling.
And I'm the complete opposite. So I know the style that Joey Janela is popular for, and I respect that style. It's not something I like competing in. But it takes a special breed of person that wants to do that kind of stuff to themselves. And I think without the crutch of that type of match, you saw some extreme limitations in the game, which was very unfortunate. I thought that he could have performed at a higher level. I know that he could have, because he's a professional, but he just looked like he was kind of going through the motions when he was in the ring instead of really going all out like he does in some of those other matches, and that was upsetting to me.
Well, talking earlier about some of these young guys in here, Joey Janela is one of these young guys. I was concerned that he's not capable of putting on a performance without something breaking over his head, being stapled, landing on tacks. Things that I kind of feel like Joey Janela works like Mick Foley did, where he
Right.
felt like if he didn't hurt severely after the match was over, he didn't do it right, which wasn't always true because Mick Foley was capable. Joey Janela is too. He's just got to find that right spot where he goes on, because even then, with him going out and doing these amazing weapons and spots and barbed wire and all this, it gets old once you see it 15 times.
Right.
I think the hardcore title in WCW proved that people do get tired of hardcore matches.
And I think that he's capable once again, but the difference is you brought up Mick Foley, and when Mick Foley would have a regular match, right? Maybe he still did the apron elbow drop, and that was the extreme spot in that match. But it didn't look like he was just going through the motions when he was in the ring. There was a moment when Joey Janela got the hot tag, and he was giving clotheslines, and it just looked half-assed, to be honest with you. I thought that he could have came into the ring full of energy, and it just didn't deliver from that standpoint. And it just really concreted the fact that, yeah, maybe he is just that type of wrestler because he doesn't want to do anything else, even though he's capable of doing it.
With that being said, this was a tag team match. I don't want to judge a guy's singular abilities based on being put in a 6-man tag match.
Fair enough.
So yeah, he could have done better. I don't argue that, but he's also young. He has things to learn. I think that's one of those things he probably needs to learn.
So we saw the victory. Death Triangle won. Pac pinned Janela after the Black Arrow. I'm not sure what he calls it in AEW. Is it the Black Arrow?
No, it's the Black Arrow.
Okay.
In the other promotion, it was the Red Arrow.
Okay. And then we saw the Death Triangle put on to the 3 of those guys. What do you think of that move?
That's an interesting move that requires a very specific amount of people.
You got to bring all three people in and
Yep.
then maneuver them in a way that where you can get on top of them. Like that's very complicated. But yeah,
There was a lot of A needs to be inserted into B, B needs to be behind C. I need to see a drawing diagram if I was to put that on myself.
right. So you saw that broken up by the best friends. What'd you think of that?
And eventually, Orange Cassidy, as he finally made it to the ring. I think we're building up a story again for a 3-man of best friends and Orange Cassidy reviving his match against Pac.
Which
I'm
is
not upset with it.
yeah, it's a good call. I love that match. I loved at Revolution between those two. I just still don't think, and this isn't talent wise, but the way that they've been booked wise, Best Friends is not a threat to Death Triangle. I also thought that Death Triangle, with it being this was their first match, right, as a team.
Yes.
They had a good match with Private Party and Joey and Janela. That's not the question. But for wrestling, I feel like as a Death Triangle, you needed them to make a strong statement with it being their first match or their first few matches. And they should have brought in some local enhancement talent even.
Nah.
No, you're not a fan of making strong teams look strong, and you'd rather a strong team look like they had a struggle.
They can make a strong team out of Death Triangle without bringing in some enhancement talent that no one's heard of. I mean, as soon as you go and in this corner, blah 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 that no one cares about, no one's ever heard of, you already know how the match is going to end. So you're not really building anything. You're just going, oh, they're going to squash these guys.
Sure, and that's a great.
I have a hard time suspending my disbelief with that, and that's what you really need for this. Private Party. I don't know why I wanted to say Public Party. Private Party is a really good tag team.
Enemy.
That may have been it. Yeah, Private Party is a really good tag team. They always put on a show. They're really good at this tag team performance. So I don't think it was a bad option. They definitely need to put another tag team or 3 in between them and Best Friends.
See, like I could see Private Party having a great match with the Young Bucks, and that would be believable to me. But when you put them in with like the Lucha Brothers, I would want to see the Lucha Brothers dominate Private Party, even though the Young Bucks could go toe to toe with the Lucha Brothers.
And they have.
And it's just this weird mind thing, right? Like Private Party can have a good talented match with these guys, but they can't stand toe to toe with these guys. Because it's two types of wrestling at that point. Like you're talking about a fight versus a wrestling match, and I want to see Death Triangle. Like to me, talent wise, they are the most legitimate, even more so maybe than Inner Circle. Lucha Brothers compared to Santana and Ortiz, I feel like the Lucha Brothers are more of a threat than Ortiz and Santana. I think that Pac is more of a threat than Jake Hager. So I want to see those 3 like really dominate their competition. And maybe you're right. Maybe you don't bring in people that like you don't have any clue. But back in the old day of WCW, you did have people under roster and they were pretty much enhancement talent, and all they did was lose every week.
Yeah.
But you still saw them every week. It's like the American males, right? That was Buff Bagwell and Scotty Riggs. They were the American males, and nobody knew who they were until Buff Bagwell joined the NWO. Scotty Riggs joined the Flock. But each week, they came out and they were clapping over their head, and the fans got into it, and I actually stole that when I was wrestling. When I turned face for a brief moment, I came out to Moni Moni and I did the same clap. But you saw them every week. You started to like them, even though they weren't really great. Um, I would like to see more of that in AEW. Just if you're not going to bring in enhancement talent, get some guys over to help get other guys over. Because Death Triangle beating Private Party and Joey Janela in a quick squash match would have done nothing to the credibility of those three guys. Number one, Joey Janela was not in his type of match, so you can count him out of that. Like if it was a hardcore match, then sure, like Joey Janela would have had a chance, right? This is a straight up wrestling match, and Private Party just couldn't go toe to toe in a brawl versus the Lucha Brothers. I think you could have squashed them completely and still the next week had them win a match on Dynamite and nobody bat a second eye to it.
I mean, another problem we have with this is you're talking about a 3-man team where we're not doing a 6-man tag. We're doing 2-man tags for the most part. So, most of your team's composed of 2 people. The Young Bucks used to run with Kenny Omega to do their 6-man tag. And the problem is Kenny Omega is now with Adam Page with his own tag team. So he's not really available. Your options are the Dark Order and SCU. And that's pretty much it, aside from the team we're talking about that the story seems to be building up to, Best Friends. And that still feels like a kind of thrown together because the Best Friends were Trent and Chuck.
Chuck Taylor, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I can think of the team.
Orange
For some reason, I
Cassidy
couldn't
in
think of
there.
the Chucky part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just kind of a third person wheeling in rather than a third person in a 3-man team. So that's another problem we have, is you don't have any real established 3-man teams. I would actually venture to say that Death Triangle is the first established 3-man team.
Yeah, and it's because they were both established. The Lucha Brothers were established as a tag team, and then Pac was established as a single wrestler, and that's what's missing here. Is even Best Friends as a tag team, and even though Orange Cassidy has always been out to the ring with them, they still aren't established. Like you can look at the record all you want, and you can say, okay, oh, these guys are 2-2. I don't know what their record is right now, but say they're 2-2 in 2020. But if you don't remember them being 2-2, does it really matter if they're 2-2, or did you just put 2-2? Like, I was always a heavyweight as far as indie wrestling goes. I was lucky to be 200 pounds, but I was always over 210 pounds when a ring announcer said something to me, because on paper that's what mattered,
Right.
And I just don't feel like the Best Friends, like you're right, they're just not established yet. And maybe this puts them on a map. Maybe this match is what makes you think, oh, Best Friends and Orange Cassidy can actually hold up with these guys. But unfortunately, I don't see them booking the match the same way that they booked the singles match.
They can't.
The singles match was super over because of how they booked it, and the way that Orange Cassidy looked strong but still didn't make Pac look stupid. When I see Chuck Taylor and what was the, see, now I can't remember the other guy's name.
Trent,
yeah. I don't see them being able to face off with the teams the same way, to where you actually believe like this is legit. Whereas Pac and Orange Cassidy, you're like, oh, okay, like I can get into this, like I can suspend reality enough to know. But with Chuck and Trent, you're just like,
I want this match just because I want to see Orange Cassidy get the hot tag.
Right.
I know it's coming. There's no way you're going to convince me that it's not going to be a thing in a match, but I'm just ready for it and I'm willing to wait for it. But, pointing out the whole tag team thing, you're talking about Best Friends with Orange Cassidy, SCU with Christopher Daniels.
Right.
We're not seeing, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson with the Dark Order. We're not seeing real 3-mans or more. Even in the Inner Circle, it's Jericho and Guevara.
But even SCU, you look at them, and even before, it was Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky was the odd man out, right? And they kind of switched that flip the switch, and Christopher Daniels the guy out. But like you look at SCU as a tag team, and they just seem like a legitimate threat. And Best Friends, like even their name, it's just kind of like a joke. Like you don't really think these guys can win it all, do you?
I would go as far as to say they are labeled the enhancement talent on the roster.
That's fair.
But I can see them going over against SCU to get them in a believable match against Death Triangle.
And do you see them? Okay, and that's the way they do it, right? But do you see them beating Hangman Page and Kenny Omega for the titles?
For the titles, probably not.
But non-title match, you could see it.
Maybe.
Things would have to change with the way that they book things for me to buy into that.
I could buy it, but it's not going to be because Best Friends is the better team. It's because of friction between Kenny and Adam.
That makes sense. What about the Young Bucks?
The Young Bucks can do anything they want anytime they want. You'll never be able to not sell me on the Young Bucks talent.
But what I'm saying is do you think they could beat?
Oh, them going over
Best
the Young
Friends
Bucks,
beating the Young Bucks, believable or not? That's the question: is believable or not?
Whether it is or isn't, I'd stay away from that because maybe AEW doesn't want that question answered.
Okay. So we went into an interview with Dustin Rhodes. I don't know what to call him anymore.
You know what? He has the rights to that name. You can call him Dustin Rhodes.
Okay. So we went into a match.
I mean, it's really funny because
known as Gold Dust.
It's really funny to me because you have this entire family, literally, like Cody's family, and his wife uses the Rhodes name. His brother uses the Rhodes name. But he's like, fuck if I'm giving them an opportunity to sue me. Right. My name's Cody.
Right. So you have an interview with Dustin. What did Dustin have to say?
Dustin came out, got his suit on, got his face painted, said he's in a match tonight. He doesn't care if Adam Page likes it or not. He's his tag team partner. He's tired of the inner circle, and he's going to get some revenge.
How do you feel about Dustin's character so far in AEW?
I wish they'd kind of settle down a little bit. I feel like they're going all over the place with him. I feel like they're taking him as a coach for QT Marshall. I think they're taking him as the guardian angel for his brother, which does no favors for Cody.
And even on Twitter, he's very rah, and that's awesome. But it seems a little forced, in my opinion. It doesn't seem completely legit, and that might not be because that's not who he is. It might be because that's not who we were allowed to see. But this whole Big Brother thing, like I'm really not digging the whole Big Brother thing.
Yeah. So with Dustin, it's been very open and honest about his addictions, and he has come through that. He is very much in a sober life now, and during his entrance into this sober life, he decided that he was going to take on a very positive attitude.
Right.
And he holds to it. It's who he is. Now, we may have not been familiar for the characters he's had to play over the years, but it's always been what I've seen on Twitter for Dustin. So that's not a surprise to me to see him being a little more himself here, because he's allowed to be more himself. That's one of the things I like about this. There is definitely a piece of each person playing each character.
And that's important. That's how anybody who's ever been anybody has gotten over, is to being a little bit of themselves.
The best advice I've ever heard given for professional wrestling is take something about yourself that is you and turn it up to 11, and that's your character.
Right.
And I've always enjoyed that, and I thought it worked best.
But I mean, stuttering Goldust when he got electrocuted was really good. Like he did that really well. Whether or not it was good TV is another thing, but he played it well. I enjoyed that character.
Dustin Runnels is a great actor.
Yes.
I think he's finally getting recognized for it.
So after that, we had another search for Spears. I'm disappointed because in their 45-second spot for Search for Spears, I was not presented, and in my eyes, I was top 3 at the very least of everybody they showed.
A guy bumped his head on the side of a moving truck and managed to get in.
Yeah.
Disappointed probably isn't strong enough of a word. The fact that you actually got heat from some of the competition should say that you had the better piece.
So yeah, I still need to record a second piece and send that in. I need to do that before Wednesday this week, and we'll see what happens there. We did talk about the blood and guts rules. I didn't get a picture of the rules. Do you want to go over the rules real quick though?
So the rules are pretty much the same they've been since the early 90s. It's this is War Games, people. You may be aware of War Games. It was something that WCW did in the early 90s. 2 rings, giant cage, great storytelling. It's a great match. I feel like it's what the Elimination Chamber was based off of.
Right.
So the idea is you got 2 guys in the ring, and they're both members of a 5-man team. This particular one is going to be Inner Circle versus the Elite. And you start off with 2 guys, and one guy has basically won the coin toss. That's not how it's determined, but the idea. And every 5 minutes, or was it 2?
It's
every 2 minutes.
I want to say it's 5. But instead of the coin toss, they're doing a match this week with a 6-man tag. Which was it? Dustin? Oh no, it's not Omega. Omega's still injured, so it's going to be Dustin, Hangman Page, and Matt Jackson versus 3 members of Inner Circle, which they haven't announced yet. But that is supposed to decide who gets the advantage going into Blood and Guts on March 25th.
Right. So they start off 5 minutes one-on-one, and then because one of these teams won the match, they'll get the first teammate to enter the ring. And every 2 minutes, they'll alternate between members entering the ring until all men are in the ring, and then we actually start the match.
So we saw Nick Jackson is most likely out of commission for this match. He had that garage door rolled on top of him. Kenny Omega is kind of up in the air right now. He's got a broken hand. There was a new episode. So today's Monday. We're recording a day late than usual. But a new episode of Being the Elite came out today, and he said he was still 3 to 5 weeks out. I'm not sure how far behind they are as far as airing and where they are with that. But what do you think this is going to be? I mean, you've got a full Inner Circle. All those guys are healthy versus maybe 3 of the Elite. Where do you think we're going to go with this?
So we definitely have Nick out. We already have turmoil with Hangman Page with either of the Bucks. So there's going to be some breakdown on the side of the Elite. They're going to have to fill 1 slot, maybe even 2. I feel like the 2 candidates there are Darby Allin and Dustin Rhodes. They've both presented an argument for some revenge on the Inner Circle. So I don't know. I'd like to see Kenny in there, but I mean he showed at this Dynamite that he's not afraid to get in the ring, throw some punches. So who knows? But yeah, I'm putting my money on that slot to be filled by one of those 2 guys.
So before we go into Dustin getting in the ring with Inner Circle, why don't we go over the fact that JR sat down with Jonathan Moxley What did you think of that interview with John Moxley, who was not allowed to be at the building by medical people? They were holding him back from being in the ring because they know he's going to compete. So instead of allowing him at the building, they just say, "Hey, you stay home. We can make sure you recuperate." What did Moxley have to say?
Nothing that was memorable to me.
Right. The only thing that stood out was step up to the batter's box, bitch. That was like the one memorable line of the whole interview. It felt very forced from the other platform when Jim Ross would sit down with other people in their homes
Yeah.
and do these interviews, and I was just like, all right, can we not do this? Like, you guys have been doing a pretty good job of staying away from other things. Let's add this to the list of things that we don't want to copy from the other place.
I mean, the only thing they could do to make that better was have his wife come up behind and support him. That is the only thing they could have done to fix that. And obviously they didn't do that, so I would have been fine if it wasn't in there.
Oh, and you know what? I had a note I wanted to go over. The Britt Baker segment we talked about a while back, I thought was really good, but I thought it was drug out a little bit. I thought that it went a little long, and because of that, they lost some of the extra pieces that would have been it. Like, you could have put the extra, so they probably went maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes between Britt Baker coming out to Big Swole coming out to Big Swole chasing Britt Baker backstage, right? Probably was a total of 4 or 5 minutes. You could have done that in 2 minutes and got a much better reaction, and then put that 3 minutes back into the main event that we're about to talk about. And it would have been a much better time spent than you just doing it the way that you guys did, because you kind of lost a little bit of the crowd reaction when it went so long with Britt Baker and right. Tony. And that was mostly because of Britt. Like, when Big Swole came out, they cut to the chase. It was mostly the interaction with the crowd and Tony with Britt Baker. Just speed that up a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
So we went into our main event. It was Chris and Sammy versus who's the real best friends, okay? Versus Hangman and Dustin. What do you have to say about this match?
All right, so production, little things. We hit on it a lot. The lower thirds for Adam Page, since I forget the event, I think it was Memorial Day or some holiday, and the stupid things they've put in his lower third,
yeah, they've been hilarious.
Have been great. I mean, they basically just take a quote from Adam Page each time, and his lower third this week was, hasn't even talked to Dustin today.
And then you have Dustin going in the ring with them, which was an interesting exchange between the two. I don't know if I fully buy into Adam Page being like the what the fuck guy. Like, his facial expression just doesn't sell that well. It's probably the blonde hair, like even in the picture that we see right here, like, he looks mad, but it's like you almost don't take him serious because he's such a good looking dude. I honestly think that's probably what it is. He's just a guy that, like, you feel like would just be really cool to hang out with. And he doesn't really get mad. He's just drinking beer and having fun. So you had a little bit of that between Dustin and Adam before the match, and you even saw Adam, I thought was interesting. You could see him say, for fuck's sake. He mouthed it. He probably said it out loud too. The cameras didn't pick it up, but he said, for fuck's sake. You definitely saw it on camera. I thought that was interesting because, other platforms definitely try showing a different camera angle anytime that kind of stuff happens. And it's been really cool to see not TV PG on my wrestling TV again.
Yeah, it's been great. The agreements with AEW and Turner, obviously AEW has said, we didn't say it on national television. Tony Schiavone may have said, "What the fuck?"
Right.
But we didn't say it on national television. You may have saw him mouth it. We
Right.
didn't say it.
Yeah.
And I love them
Nobody
using that
heard
line.
it.
I mean, it says in the FCC that we can't say this.
Right.
So yeah, I really enjoy that they're using the PG-13 and they're stretching it to the limit.
So what'd you think about the actual match itself?
So the match itself was good. I really like the fact that we're taking people who are basically 50 and older. I know Chris Jericho's not quite there yet, and we're putting them in tag team
Is he not?
matches.
It's
He's 49.
okay.
He's 49.
I was like, he seems pretty close.
He may have the 50-year-old body, but he's still 49.
Actually, since you brought that up, I got to give him credit. He's looking like he's getting back into shape. He was looking pretty flabby lately. And he's still got a little bit of a gut, but he's 50 years old for one, almost 50 years old. I have no room to talk. I have a gut. I'm also not on national television every week wrestling. And that's where
Despite
the
us
difference
trying
is.
to fix that.
But I like, you could see his abs this week. So you can definitely tell he's definitely doing gym work harder, and he's trying to get in a better shape. And so kudos to you, Chris Jericho, for doing that,
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, like I said, you have these old guys, these guys who've been in it for 30 years easy. Jericho probably since he could walk, and then Dustin born into it, so he was probably doing stuff in the womb. You have these guys, and then you partner them with guys who have not hit the age of 25 yet. So basically, guys half their age, quite literally, and they're working together, they're doing spots, they're calling, and it was great to see that.
Yeah. And the work that Jericho and Sammy have done together, is the chemistry there is phenomenal. I mean, Sammy, people compare him to a younger Eddie Guerrero, but you really see the resemblance of Chris Jericho there. His whole persona is more Chris Jericho, and it's been really exciting to watch those guys kind of gel off each other. And we also saw some old things that we haven't seen in a while. You saw Jericho even bring out the springboard dropkick to the apron, which is something that he was really known for in WCW. He did it almost every match, and when he went to WWE, he kind of stopped using it except on big occasions. And it was really cool to see him pull it out tonight and hit it on Hangman Page, who went to the apron. And then down to the floor, he had a little spat with Santana and Ortiz. And in the meantime, Jericho grabbed a beer and went on the outside, which was a really cool spot, if you want to talk about that for a second.
Oh, no, go ahead and take that one.
Okay, so
that one really means something to you.
Yeah, so Jericho grabs a beer on the outside, and then he's mocking Adam Page, talking about cowboy shit, and he takes a big swig of Bud Light, and then cheers to the crowd, takes another big swig, and perfect heel fashion of always making the babyface look bigger than they actually are. He walks over to Hangman Page, who then punches Jericho in the face. Beer goes flying out of his mouth, to the great enjoyment of everybody in the crowd, the great enjoyment of me, because I always love the being punched and something coming out of your mouth. Shawn Michaels was big with spitting his gum out on certain moves. You would see his gum go flying, and it always looked like a tooth. It's things I did when I was wrestling. So I really enjoyed it, but the thing I enjoyed most was the slow bump that Jericho took. It was like slow motion, and Jericho's just holding out the beer. And Hangman Page casually picks up the beer out of Jericho's hand. Jericho hits the floor, and Page just takes a sip. And I was like, man, this is good TV. This is exactly what we were talking about when we were talking about earlier, working the camera. You had one camera that got Jericho cheersing the crowd, And then you got the other camera that got the punch and Jericho spitting the beer up. And then as soon as they saw that, you had camera B again switch, and you saw the back of Jericho and him falling to the floor. It was great production work by AEW. It was great production work by TNT, and it was great work calling the spot from Jericho and Adam Page. Like, that was my favorite part of the match, guys. Like, that was really good stuff. All right, sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. So it's the tag team storytelling. You have the bad guys and the good guys, and they're going back and forth, and you got to make it look like the good guys aren't going to be able to pull it out. They eventually get to the end, which I thought was a very impressive finish. We normally have the V-Trigger buckshot lariat,
right,
as the finisher with Kenny and Hangman. Well, we did a nice different thing with Dustin doing a Canadian Destroyer into a buckshot lariat.
What does Dustin call that, by the way? Is it like the Destroyer? Like, it's not Canadian. He's not Canadian. It's very impressive when I see him do it, especially like tonight. He did it. I think he did it to Hager, and we talked about it wasn't very well.
Yeah, tonight, Hager. That's the move that you really have to have good timing with your opponent with, and Hager did not have that.
Tonight, I think he did it on Sammy.
Yes.
And Sammy took it like a freaking champ because Sammy's so talented. And
God, that kid is talented.
Then he took the buckshot lariat like a champ, like back to back. And God, it looked so good. And yeah, you're right. He got the victory. 1, 2, 3. But then post-match.
Man, post-match. Any story where you have the inner circle involved, you have the guys who weren't in the ring, they're now in the ring, and they're just going to beat up on whoever they were just... Nobody saw that coming.
Nope.
So, numbers game.
Yep. So you had them about to triple bomb, which I still love. Like, I love that they're using the triple bomb. Like,
yeah,
because it's still to Moxley, right? It's not, Moxley's not out there right now, but the message they're sending to the competition is like, hey, we're literally stealing your big faction's move, and we're putting it on our big faction. But we're gonna do it to the guy that actually started the big move. And it's just like a total slap to the face. I kind of love it. Because I always like the underdog, and AEW is definitely the underdog in this fight. Even though they're not performing that way, they just don't have the money or the experience yet that the other platform does. And so yeah, they went for the triple powerbomb on Hangman. Here comes Matt. We saw Matt leave earlier with Kenny Omega.
We also saw Cody and Kenny come in too.
Yep. We saw them all.
They got destroyed.
They left. And then they came back out. They got destroyed as well. And then we saw at the end of the show, Chris Jericho just sitting on the throat of Matt Jackson, and them doing the 5-man finger. What do you think of the whole everybody in inner circle flipping off the camera? Like,
I mean, I feel like they felt like they needed something, and maybe Chris Jericho said, fuck it. And everybody was like, yeah, fuck it. Finger. There we go.
Like, so it's really weird to me that I think this way. But Hangman doing it is like more like the Stone Cold way, right? You've got the Steve Austin, give him the double bird, and it's acceptable. It seems forced when Inner Circle does it, and it's not as cool than when Hangman Page flips Matt Jackson off to his face.
Or when Matt Jackson flipped Hangman Page off to his face. That was great.
Because you see that heat that's there between those two, where this is just like, hey, we're just doing this to kind of be cool. It's almost like the Two Sweets sign to me. Instead of them doing this to each other, they're just flipping the camera off together, and it's just like, this isn't original, this isn't cool, this is forced, and I don't like it.
Yeah, it feels very forced. I agree.
And that's how we went off air with AEW. But
So before we move on,
okay.
what was your favorite match tonight?
Oh,
Or
favorite
for this
match.
match?
Let's go back. And next week we're gonna start doing a new segment where we kind of do this better. But I think I'm kind of scrolling through. The main event was really good. But if I was to give my favorite match, it would probably be MJF Butcher and the Blade versus Jurassic Express. I thought that all 6 of those guys really performed well, and they performed at a high level. And it was the best match of the night, talent wise as well as story wise. I thought it was all there. It all clicked. What about you?
The same. I felt like there was a lot of skill in what they did. I felt like there was a lot of entertainment in what they did. Even a little bit of comedy. I love some of the heel comedy stuff in wrestling, and there's no one who's going to bring it better than MJF.
MJF is literally the second coming of Ric Flair. And it takes a special man to believe when he backs off that he's just being a complete coward. But at the same time, you know that he can still back up his game, right? Like when Ric Flair... Go ahead.
His cowardice feels very strategic.
Right. When Ric Flair did it...
I didn't get that.
No, really? You didn't see that with Ric Flair?
I didn't... God, a lot of my Ric Flair memories are like 97, 98. So I don't feel so much for him like it was strategic, maybe to back off, catch his breath, do something maybe a little dirty. But I feel like
I think Ric Flair
his
did it
backing
better.
off is just a plan. You think so?
Yeah, and because MJF, like when you look at him, he looks super tough, right? Ric Flair's always kind of been a little flabby, like he's like the guy you don't want to mess with because of experience, not because of what he looks like. Whereas MJF, if you see MJF in a bar, you could immediately say, all right, that guy could take me. Ric Flair, you wouldn't think that about, especially with the white hair, his whole career. Right. So when he backed off, it always seemed like, oh, like this is legit. Like he knows, Ric Flair knows this other guy could beat him up. But with MJF, it's like, you're doing it to Luchasaurus, that's believable. But if you did it to Jungle Boy, it's not as believable unless you're doing it a strategy. And that's my point, is Ric Flair could do it to anybody. He could beg off to anybody, and it'd be, okay, yeah, that guy could take Ric Flair out. Whereas MJF looks the part more than Ric Flair did in his prime. Not that ever Ric Flair looked bad, just,
No.
MJF just looks better than you, and he knows it.
I've always felt like Ric Flair did it because he needed it, like you pointed out. Where I feel like MJF does it because it's easier.
I would say that MJF, when he backed in, so this was my favorite selling point as well. So anybody not familiar with terms, I know I sometimes use terms that smart marks would use. MJF backed into Luchasaurus, and he sold it like, man, I screwed up and I backed into my opponent. They're on their feet and I'm in trouble. And then he turned around and he realized that it was Luchasaurus instead of like Jungle Boy. And he sold it even better when he saw Luchasaurus, where he already did enough when he backed into him. And he's like, But then he turned around and he saw Luchasaurus and he's like, oh God, like I didn't know it was you. I'm so sorry. Like I thought that was brilliant on MJF's side.
All right. For the sake of not having a Revolution podcast again, let's go ahead and move on to the news.
Well, before we move to the news, I do have to ruin pro wrestling for you guys.
Oh.
So we talked about the main event, and really good main event. I really enjoyed it. There was a time where Dustin Rhodes got the hot tag. He came in. He was getting the advantage over Sammy. He got the advantage on Jericho. Jericho outsmarted him long enough to allow Sammy to knock him down with a missile drop kick off the top rope. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So, after the missile drop kick off the top rope, there was a very, very important pin, which we'll kind of go over. Let me know if you see anything here. So you get the pin, 1, 2, kick out.
Yeah.
1, 2, all right, kick out. And let's slow it down just a little bit.
He hit his boot. That's
1,
obviously what happened.
No, you see him get closer.
Yeah, see, he hit his boot.
So the ref obviously was trying to help Dustin out. Maybe Dustin's getting a little bit older. Maybe he can't hear as well. It's always been good practice as a referee to really scream out your numbers, and that's why you always hear the crowd go 2 after a 2 count, because they're so used to the ref being there saying it. There is no place in professional wrestling, especially on national television, that you see something like this. And this is just as big as a fuck up, in my opinion, as you had with Dark Order and Dustin Rhodes. And this is the second time that Dustin Rhodes has been involved, and the second time it's not Dustin Rhodes' fault, but he was involved in both, and you can't have that on national television.
Are you saying there's a coincidence there?
It's weird that it was Dustin both times. And yeah. You know, I mean, you had Cody Rhodes and Jericho really mess up a power slam on a Dynamite. But this is legitimately a ref. I don't think it was seen by a lot of people. I
agree.
Did you see it when it happened?
I didn't see it because, like I said, I don't really focus on every little thing that's happening. I'm just taking in a story. So I typically miss these things, and then you can bring them to me and ruin wrestling for me over and over again.
Yes. For me, this is one of those little things that ruins disbelief, and if seen by the wrong people, you totally ruin your product. And AEW, I just beg you to be better than what we just saw, because that should not have happened. Like, there's no excuse for a referee on national television to help somebody kick out.
Literally.
Yeah, like. And it was funny because I listened to the Tony Khan podcast after this, and you know, he was praising all these guys, and we see it one more time. He gets closer and closer, and like you saw, he had no problem the first 2 counts, and then his hand comes up and hits at the 3rd count, and you see his face go up and look at his legs, and
even in that, I saw where he kind of went higher and out. He kind of paused for a moment, even. That made that 3rd swing a little longer than his first 2.
Yeah. Like I said, I see these kind of things because I've been around it. But if I see it, there's other people seeing it too, and we can't have that. So let's go into the dirt sheets. Before we go to the dirt sheets, we'll talk about the next Dynamite. So we have the coronavirus taking over the world, right? And because of that, this week's Dynamite's going to be moved to Jacksonville to a restricted audience. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure if that means like what we saw in Smackdown, where it's completely empty, or if maybe they just have, 10, 20 people there. I'm not sure. What's your thoughts on the coronavirus and continuing wrestling while this is going on?
I would say that the coronavirus has made Florida the place to be, between the beaches and the professional wrestling taking place between Orlando and Jacksonville for who knows how long.
That is true.
It's the place to be now for professional wrestling.
Um,
I like the fact that they're not canceling shows per se. They realize people are at home. They realize they put out entertainment, even if it is professional wrestling. Vince McMahon is very popular in saying that he does sports entertainment. Um, I agree with that just as much as I do professional wrestling. So I'm really glad that they've decided to carry on with their product and continue entertaining people who, for the most part, are staying home when they typically wouldn't.
and you mentioned Vince McMahon. It's also important to say that he's always been a firm believer of the show must go on. And we've seen some really bad situations of that. Owen Hart passing away in the middle of the ring. They continued the show there. I don't think that was the right call in that situation. But then again, we had 9/11, and after 9/11, they did continue the shows. I thought that was the absolute right call to show that, like, we're not fearing this. The show must go on, and we're going to continue with our lives no matter what you tried to do to us. I thought that was the right attitude. So with that being said, do you think this is the right way to go? Clearing out the crowd and still performing wrestling each week.
SmackDown this past Friday had one of its highest ratings it's had, especially since it's been on Fox, and they did it to an empty crowd. I think it's, I mean, even Cody said it's our job as entertainers to entertain people when they need us to entertain them. We don't shut down just because they've been shut down. And I really agree with that.
Sami
I think
Zayn.
it's the right thing to do.
Sami Zayn posted a tweet, and we don't talk about those guys a lot, but he posted a tweet after, and he talked about some of the smallest crowds that he ever wrestled in, and because wrestling in a side of an empty arena, it's hard. The thing about wrestling is some people say it's a show, some people say it's fake. I hate the word fake when you talk about wrestling because it's definitely not fake. I've got a screwed up back thanks to the sport of professional wrestling, so it's not fake. But the adrenaline rush you get from the crowd is what actually helps it not hurt as much to get kicked in the face, get punched in the face, fall on your back from the top rope to the ground outside of the ring. And then now you're doing that, in front of nobody. And they talk about your bump card, and you only have so many bumps, which is so many falls you can take before you're done. So you should really save them for the times you're in front of the crowd, instead of doing it in front of nobody. And now you're literally doing it in front of nobody, but at the same time you're doing it in front of millions of people. So it's
Right.
a really weird situation that we're in. But I'm with you. I'm glad they're continuing with the show, because what else are we gonna do?
Right.
We've got to have TV to watch if we can't go anywhere. So we've had a few show announcements, and some of these matches might not go on. I did read some news that Dave Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer stated that Tony Khan is hard to work rewriting this week's Dynamite card. So some of these matches were announced prior to the whole coronavirus thing going on. So we might not see these, but we did get a few announcements. Let's go through a couple of these. The first one being, we've got the Lucha Brothers versus the Best Friends. And we have Pac and Orange Cassidy at ringside. What do you think is going to happen in this match? And who do you what's your prediction?
Gonna go with the prediction of Lucha Brothers going over. We need storyline, in my opinion. We need to add the orange flavor to that mix to make it where that team can go over. The Lucha Brothers are really hot. I don't think you're gonna see them go under to the mid card, even kind of literally their fourth place in the tag team rankings. I don't see the Lucha Brothers going down to them.
I would have to disagree. In order for me to buy this at a bigger standpoint, either at blood and guts. I was going to say blood for glory. I'm mixing another promotion in there with it. But Blood and Guts, or even the next pay-per-view, if this is one of the matches we're gonna see, I need to see Best Friends kind of stand up against the Lucha Brothers without the help of Orange Cassidy and actually win this cleanly in order for me to believe that they could go to the pay-per-view or Blood and Guts and win cleanly as well over the Lucha Brothers and Pac Death Triangle.
Pac's going to be ringside. You're not going to see it clean.
Right. So the next match, we have another tag match. So we had both of these teams last week facing each other in 6-man tags. This week we have both teams facing each other in tag team action. We got the Butcher and Blade with the Beautiful Bunny versus Jurassic Express with Marco Stunt. What do you think is going to happen in this match?
I think it's the right call to put Stunt on the outside of the ring. He's a good talent, but he doesn't make for a believable tag team match unless you want the two small guys.
And for the most part, he's always on the outside unless it's a 6-man tag, and I think that's the correct thing to do as well. It's always like any offense he gets in is usually assisted by one of the other two, and I think they've kind of backed themselves in a corner there because of that. But at the same time, do you look at Marco Stunt and do you see him being as believable as per se Rey Mysterio? Even in early WCW when Rey Mysterio was much smaller than what he was when he finally came to WWE. Do you see any comparison there, and why or why not?
I haven't seen it yet. Like you said, a lot of Marco Stunt's moves have been assisted, so it kind of takes away from what we perceive his ability to be.
Right.
I could see that more with Jack Perry, but Marco Stunt's really a hard sell for me at this point.
And predictions on this match? Who's going over?
God, this could go either way. These guys have been up and down, and there's no real story to it. It's just we're putting on a match to entertain you guys. I can tell you that I will be entertained. I don't fear that that's not the case. But yeah, and honestly, I'm good with it going either way.
I want to see. I'm still not sold. They've done a really good job with both Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy and the way that they booked them and made them look stronger. I'm still not completely sold on Jungle Boy being a top tier talent. Luchasaurus, on the other hand, I think he could be main eventing any show, anytime. But I personally want to see Butcher and the Blade get a bigger push, because I would love to see them go up against people like the Young Bucks and people like Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, and see what kind of talent we're actually working with when it comes to Butcher and the Blade.
You know, right now, Butcher and the Blade feel like our only real brawl talent team.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind seeing another real brawler-esque tag team for them to go against. Just a real question of who's really better. Because when you put brawling against what like the Young Bucks do, the Young Bucks typically win out.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see brawler versus brawler.
Well, we probably have that because there's a rumor that there's a certain tag team that's contract or their non-compete disclosures coming up soon, so we may see that soon.
Yeah, I may be fantasy booking. I don't know.
So the last match that was advertised is the Inner Circle versus the Elite 6-man tag. This isn't the 5-on-5 like Blood and Guts. But the winners of this match will have the advantage going into the cage match of Blood and Guts. Where do you see this going?
I see the Inner Circle doing something dirty to win this match and take the advantage.
I completely agree with you on that. And I think there's no way that the Elite wins this match, to be honest with you. Which is kind of a shame. Like, I would much rather at least believe that the Elite was going to have the advantage going into Blood and Guts. but I think the writing's on the wall on this match. Everybody knows what's going to happen, and that's okay, but at the same time, it's not okay. So yeah, let's go into a little bit of news outside of the ring, and then we'll just wrap it up. Not much, but I did see that JR on his podcast, I know you're a big listener to the JR podcast, said that he completely underestimated Orange Cassidy, and that Orange Cassidy's a stud. So I just love when people eat crow.
I gotta say I'm proud of JR because JR has been really good about it here lately, at least, admitting when he was wrong. And it's always nice to hear that you're wrong about talent, especially when your job was talent relations for so long.
Right. And it was his main job to bring in talent to that other platform, and to see what they would have missed with somebody like Orange Cassidy, who is the most over person on the roster. Like, come at me. You could put Jon Moxley out first and then put Orange Cassidy out second, and I really think Orange Cassidy may get a bigger pop than Jon Moxley.
I will say, and nothing to back this up but my own two eyeballs, I guarantee you Orange Cassidy sells more merch.
Yeah, so... And you got people dressing up like Orange Cassidy, sitting in the crowd every week, giving the thumbs up, wearing the jeans jacket, wearing the sunglasses. It's been really fun to watch. And it's like you can't do anything with that as far as like long-term goals. He's not going to be the face of the company. He doesn't have the stature. He doesn't have the believableness to put the heavyweight championship on him, but it's going to be a really fun ride to see where this goes.
But to quote Bruce Prichard, he doesn't need the title.
No, he really doesn't. And you could even put it on him in a surprise match, right? And then take it back off, the next show or what, David Arquette him, which David Arquette should have never won the championship, but this is more of a type of thing that you would do with that kind of storyline.
Yeah. We'll save David Arquette for another episode.
And then the last piece of news, we already talked about how AEW is moving their show to a restricted audience. The plan's still to go forward with Blood and Guts, which is interesting because Blood and Guts is just a few weeks away. And you're going to ask 6 people to go into a cage match. And we already talked about this. The crowd feeding that adrenaline rush. And if you don't have that and something as brutal as a 10-man cage match, that's going to be really hard on the talent. But yeah, they are expected to have everything written up to Double or Nothing 2, which is a very nice thing to see because too often you see in other shows things changing at the show's on and things are changing like in the next 15 minutes, and it shows because there's no thought process behind what you're doing, and everything week in and week out has led up to other stuff, which is why AEW has been so exciting in my opinion, because everything's meaning something. But man, I feel bad for the Elite and Inner Circle if they have to go into a 10-man cage match without any crowd. And I hope that they fix the cage too. I know it's 2 rings, 2 cages, so it's a little bit different, but they've got to secure it better than they did that first cage match, because that was very scary. And when you have 10 people, you have 10 times the risk of somebody getting hurt, and it looks like I'm frozen. So I like that Shane is just looking at me in this tone. You can hear me, huh? Oh, there you go. Okay. Hello?
Yeah, the call locked up.
Yeah, you were sitting up looking at the screen, and that's where you get stuck. We're going to leave that in there, though. So, anything you want to talk about in closing or on that last piece of news?
This whole thing with professional wrestling, even as announced today, the mecca of wrestling events has been moved to Orlando. So this
Did
is
that
going to be
officially
the
come out?
most interesting.
I know that Vince was still trying to fight it a little bit. He's not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of it, especially with something like that. That it's so much. You
The
go
company
years,
officially made a statement.
and you're frozen again. I hear you, but oh, there you are. Okay, the
Okay.
company. Nope, nope, nope. Oh, yep. So the company did officially make a statement. It is being moved to the performance center.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a shame because so much time and money, more importantly, is put into some of these big events. You're spending millions of dollars hoping to get $1 million in return, and now all that money's literally thrown away. And it's not anybody's fault. It just sucks.
Yeah, I think that's what took it so long to be declared was, everyone on both sides were trying to push back as hard as they could, but the outlook wasn't getting any brighter.
Yeah. Anything else other than that?
No, it was a really good show. It was much better than the week prior, and I really enjoyed the performance.
Yeah, I thought we saw more wrestling and we saw better wrestling, and it definitely wasn't as flat. This if I had to rate it, was probably 3.5 to 4 star show, um, as opposed to the last week where I would have probably gave 1.5. And
Mhm.
that's just because I know that they still worked hard to put on a good show. So I'm trying to be kind of merciful.
I mean,
Entertainment wise, it was not there.
last week had great story, but none of that story transitioned into the ring.
Right.
This week they managed to tell good stories in the ring as well as outside, and that was very important to me.
All right. So let's wrap it up. Where can people find you?
You can find me on all the social media at red_fox15. Twitter is your best place to find me, and on Wednesday nights after Dynamite, you can find me at twitch.tv/redfox15.
And I am Tighe Fighter X1 on all the things as well. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of The Tie Up. We will see you again next week. Thanks so much and have a great night and be safe.